Avery Johnson, a woman who had defied the odds to become the CEO of one of the fastest-growing companies in the tech world. Avery had spent years building her empire from the ground up, transforming her vision into a thriving, multi-million-dollar business. But one morning, as she walked into the lobby of the very building where her company was headquartered, Avery was met with an unexpected challenge. The security guard at the front desk, a man in his early 40s, eyed her with a suspicious glance. "Excuse me, ma'am," the guard said, his voice somewhat cold. "Can I see your ID?" Avery was momentarily thrown off by the request. Her mind raced. Was this a mistake? She was the CEO. She had built this company from the ground up. "I'm the CEO of the company," Avery replied, her voice calm but firm. "I don't need to show you my ID to get into my own building." The guard hesitated, his fingers hovering over the computer screen as if unsure of what to do next. He glanced at her again, then back at the list he was reviewing. "I'm gonna need to check the list of employees before you can go upstairs, ma'am," he said, his tone suggesting that the matter was not up for discussion. Company policy. Avery felt a knot form in her stomach. She had been in this building countless times. She had never been stopped before. "I'm telling you, I'm the CEO," she repeated, her patience beginning to wear thin. "My name is Avery Johnson. You really need to check with your supervisor." Still not convinced, the guard picked up the phone and began dialing. Avery stood in silence, watching as he made the call, her frustration growing with each passing second. She couldn't believe this was happening. This was her building, her company, and yet, she was being treated like a stranger. "Yes, I have a woman here saying she's the CEO, Avery Johnson." The guard's voice came through the receiver. "But I don't see her name on the list. I need confirmation." Avery's face remained calm, but inside, her anger simmered. She had worked too hard for too long to be reduced to nothing more than a question mark. As the minutes dragged on, the situation escalated. More security personnel appeared, and Avery felt the eyes of the lobby staff on her. Her role as a leader, the authority she had earned through years of sacrifice and determination, was suddenly in question. "I'm the CEO," Avery said again, her voice carrying a mix of frustration and disbelief. "I run this company. Call your supervisor." The security guard looked up at her once more, unsure of what to do. He seemed conflicted, caught between protocol and his growing sense that something wasn't quite right. Avery could feel the tension mounting, and she stood her ground, unwilling to back down. By this point, the situation had become bigger than just a simple check-in. It was clear that, in the eyes of these security guards, Avery's presence was being questioned, not because of any lack of credentials, but because of her race. What should have been a routine day in her company's headquarters had turned into a shocking confrontation. Avery, a black woman, was being stopped by security in her own building. The fact that this moment even existed, this doubt cast on her authority, was a painful reminder of the barriers many black executives face in corporate spaces. It was a moment that would soon go viral, igniting a firestorm of reactions. But for Avery, it was more than just an incident. It was a painful reminder of the systemic racism that continues to lurk in the corners of corporate America. Avery's resolve only strengthened as the minutes dragged on, but the weight of the situation hung heavy in the air. It wasn't just a personal affront. It was a stark reminder of the deep-seated racism that lingered in the very spaces where power was supposed to be defined by merit, not appearance. Avery had earned her place here, and yet her right to occupy the space was being questioned. Not by strangers, but by the very people who worked alongside her every day. The awkwardness was palpable, and Avery's frustration turned into a quiet anger. She had spent years building this company, making it a beacon of success in a competitive industry, but now, it felt like none of that mattered in the eyes of the very people she had once trusted. "Please, someone needs to take responsibility for this," Avery said, the tremor in her voice betraying her calm exterior. She was done with the stalling, done with the questioning. This was no longer just about her. This was about proving to herself, and to everyone watching, that this moment would not define her. The building manager finally appeared, his face an unreadable mask of discomfort. He approached the security desk, glanced at Avery, then at the security guards who stood in their circle around her, still unconvinced of her legitimacy. "We don't have you listed on the visitor register today," the manager said flatly, as if Avery's identity could be so easily disputed. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Avery's chest tightened. The disbelief was now overwhelming. She fought to stay composed, even as a wave of frustration flooded her. "I've been the CEO of this company for years," she replied, the weight of each word becoming heavier. "You've all seen me in this building every single day. How is this even possible?" The manager faltered, clearly uncomfortable, his eyes darting between Avery and the security personnel who were still questioning her. The air in the lobby grew thick with tension, as if the entire building was holding its breath. It was clear now. This wasn't just about a lack of recognition, it was about something deeper, something far more insidious. The way the manager hesitated, the way the guards continued to scrutinize her, it wasn't because she didn't belong in the building. It was because they couldn't accept that someone who looked like Avery could occupy such a powerful role. That realization hit her like a cold wave. This wasn't a mistake, an oversight, or even poor training. This was systemic racism in full view. Avery's mind raced. She had encountered challenges throughout her career. As a black woman in a position of power, she had learned to navigate subtle forms of discrimination, often in silence. But this was different. This was blatant. This was the type of racial bias that, even in 2023, still permeated the workplace, still made black executives question whether their accomplishments were truly seen or respected. Her heart beat faster, but she stood firm. This was her company, her success, her rightful place in this building, and she wasn't going to let them push her out. The building's management team, still fumbling with their own doubts and discomfort, finally relented. They apologized for the confusion, but the damage was done. Avery's confidence in the company she had built was now fractured. This wasn't just about this moment. It was about the company's deeper failure to recognize the reality that she, as a black woman, was seen differently in their eyes. Avery stood there, not just a victim of a singular event, but a symbol of something much larger. A stark reminder that no matter how much success she had achieved, no matter how high she had risen, her presence in the room was still questioned by people who should have been her allies. This wasn't an isolated incident. It wasn't a random mistake. This was a reflection of how deeply ingrained racial bias was, even at the highest levels of business. Avery wasn't just being questioned because of an oversight. She was being questioned because of the color of her skin. And that was the hardest truth to swallow. Inside the lobby, the tension continued to grow. Avery remained calm, but the weight of the situation pressed down on her. Her frustration simmered beneath the surface, and she could feel the eyes of her employees on her, none of them stepping forward to support her. The longer she stood there, the more it became clear that this wasn't just about a simple mistake or misunderstanding. It was about something much deeper. The security guards, still questioning her presence, seemed determined to make her prove herself. They refused to acknowledge who she was, her position, and the years of hard work she had put into building her company. It was as though her entire career had been stripped away in an instant, reduced to nothing more than a question mark in their eyes. Despite this, Avery remained composed, unwilling to let them see how much this was affecting her. She had faced countless challenges before, but never had her authority been so blatantly questioned in her own workplace. It wasn't until one of the senior executives, someone who was often mistaken for the CEO due to her high visibility in the building, was alerted to what was happening that things began to shift. The executive had been busy with meetings, but when she found out what was going on in the lobby, she immediately came down. As soon as she stepped off the elevator, she saw the group gathered around Avery, the security guards still looking hesitant, and Avery standing tall, but clearly frustrated. "Stop right there," the senior executive commanded, her voice sharp and authoritative. The room seemed to freeze. The security guards immediately straightened up, realizing who had just entered the scene. The senior executive was someone everyone in the building recognized, someone who was frequently seen in high-level meetings and events. Her authority was unquestioned. With a calm yet firm tone, The senior executive turned to the security guards. "This woman is the CEO of this company," she said, her words leaving no room for doubt. "You do not question her authority." Understood. Avery's heart raced, not because she felt vindicated, but because the intervention made it clear. The security guards had made a mistake. They had doubted her because of the color of her skin, and now it was being called out in front of everyone. The realization of their error was immediate, and the awkwardness in the air was palpable. The employees, who had been silently watching the scene unfold, now felt the weight of their own actions. They had seen Avery every day, worked with her, yet had allowed her to be treated as if she didn't belong. They had stood by in silence, letting this unfold without speaking up. But now, with the senior executive stepping in, they knew deep down that they had messed up. The senior executive didn't give the security guards a chance to respond. She turned back to Avery, her expression softening slightly, but still carrying a sense of authority. "I'm so sorry you had to go through this," she said. "We'll address this internally, but know that this will not stand. This will be dealt with appropriately." Avery nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and exhaustion wash over her. The situation wasn't perfect, but at least now someone had taken responsibility. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. The senior executive then addressed the staff who had been observing the situation, her tone unwavering. "Let this be a lesson. This company will not tolerate this kind of treatment toward anyone, especially not the CEO. You will not ignore the authority of those who work here based on assumptions or biases. If this happens again, there will be consequences." The employees who had been quiet up until that point shifted uncomfortably. They realized their failure to act in the moment, their silence only reinforcing the bias that had played out right in front of them. Avery had been subjected to this treatment because they had allowed it to happen. It wasn't just the security guards at fault. It was everyone in the building who had failed to stand up, to speak out, to acknowledge the bias that was so clearly at play. As Avery walked back to her office, she knew this wasn't over. She knew that this incident was a reflection of deeper issues within the company. The apology, while appreciated, wasn't enough. The true work would come in the form of real change, the kind of change that would ensure something like this would never happen again. But in that moment, as she walked through the halls of the building she had worked so hard to build, Avery also knew this. Her fight wasn't just for herself. It was for every person of color who had ever had their authority questioned or dismissed. And no matter how long it took, she would keep pushing forward. Avery's role as CEO was no longer just about running a company. It was about leading a movement that would make corporate America a more inclusive, just, and equal place for everyone. As the days passed, the internal investigation into the incident began. The building management team, along with company leadership, worked to address the lapse in judgment and the racial bias that had been exposed. Avery's story had shed light on the systemic issues that many had long ignored, and now, the company was forced to face the truth. The senior executive, who had intervened in the moment, took on a pivotal role in driving change. She began working closely with Avery to develop comprehensive diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. Policies that would ensure that no one, regardless of their race or background, would ever experience the same treatment again. Avery, for her part, was steadfast in her desire for real change. She wasn't interested in empty promises or shallow apologies. This was a turning point, and she intended to make it count. Alongside the new policies, they introduced training programs for employees at all levels, from the security staff to senior leadership, to educate them on unconscious bias, the importance of inclusivity, and how to create an environment where every employee could thrive without fear of discrimination. Avery's leadership became even more pronounced in the aftermath. Rather than retreating from the public eye, she took it upon herself to share her experience in interviews and at conferences, using her platform to raise awareness about the racial barriers that still exist in corporate America. She spoke candidly about how her experience had shaken her, but also how it had inspired her to become an even stronger advocate for change. She was determined to not just change her company, but to change the narrative surrounding Black professionals in leadership. Her transparency about her struggles was a beacon of hope for others who had felt invisible, silenced, or undervalued in their own careers. Avery understood that breaking through the glass ceiling wasn't just about reaching the top. It was about ensuring that everyone, especially those from marginalized communities, had a chance to succeed and be respected in the spaces they occupied. As the company began to implement its new initiatives, it became clear that change was happening. The employees who had once stood by in silence now began to speak up. Conversations about race, privilege, and power dynamics started happening in the halls, in meetings, and in private spaces. Avery's fight had sparked a movement within the company, one that would continue to grow and evolve. Her bravery in the face of adversity had set a new tone for what was acceptable in the workplace. But even with all the progress, Avery knew that the journey was far from over. Systemic racism wouldn't be dismantled in a single meeting or with one set of policies. True change would take time, but Avery was prepared for that. She was ready to lead not just her company, but an entire industry toward a future where every person could walk into any room and be seen for who they truly were, without prejudice. The final chapter of the story found Avery walking into her company's headquarters once more. This time, she was not greeted with suspicion or doubt, but with respect and acknowledgement. The changes were real and they were working. People no longer questioned her presence. They recognized her for what she truly was: a leader, a trailblazer, and a powerful force for change. And as Avery moved forward, she did so with a renewed sense of purpose. Her role as CEO was no longer just about managing a company. It was about ensuring that the legacy she created would pave the way for others. Her story would be a lesson for generations to come, reminding them that real progress begins when people stand up and demand better. The valuable lesson here is clear. Leadership is not just about the titles we hold, but about the change we inspire in others. It's about standing up against injustice, no matter how small or large, and using our platform to make a difference. Avery's story teaches us that it's not enough to be successful. We must also create space for others to succeed, to feel seen, and to know their worth. True leadership means pushing past the barriers that hold us back and using our experiences to lift others up. It's about speaking out, even when the odds are against us, and making sure the path we walk is one others can follow with dignity and respect. If you enjoyed listening to this story, please subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this. Don't forget to like and share.